Breaking news! Ladies and gentlemen and all in between, today we have witnessed a marvelous revolution in the world of science. Man has successfully discovered life on the moon. Yes, my friends, the moon. And what he observed there using his stupendous, new and powerful telescope will shock and amaze you, for the moon is not, as we supposed, a barren land devoid of intelligent life, but a lush ecosystem crawling with all manner of mystifying beasts. This man, the most widely reputed scientist Sir John Herschel, observed with his own eyes a beastly moon bison, Batman hybrids, glorious lunar poppies, and even moon beavers. Sounds pretty unbelievable, right? Oh, sources? You want me to prove it? Oh my god, I was just joking! Can't you take a joke? In the Victorian era, the news wasn't all that different from what it has largely become today. Mostly entertainment, with many stories floating around that are either unverified or under-researched. After all, when there is money to be made and a populace to influence, all manner of sleazy and, well, creative characters come crawling out of the woodwork looking for fame or a quick buck, or even power. And these cases of news hoaxes and fake historical tales ended up, oftentimes, sticking around even past their own debunking, or having never been debunked until recently, resulting in a present day where people still believe a lot of these tall tales, or are primed to fall for new ones. Fake news in the 19th century changed how we see history, and the stories themselves are absolutely bonkers. Come learn with me, but first, a word from today's sponsor, EveryPlate. Personally, I love to cook. It's relaxing and almost artistic for me, and it's something that my fiance and I enjoy doing together, but we both work, and I just had a major surgery, so it's difficult to find time to go grocery shopping and especially hard to figure out what to cook. I feel like we spend every night going, "What do you want for dinner?" I don't know. So EveryPlate has been an absolute game changer for us, and I couldn't be happier with it. EveryPlate is a service that plans, gathers, and delivers all the ingredients and recipes that you need to cook delicious meals at home for an affordable price, with ingredients perfectly measured for exactly what you need to cut down on food waste. It's just so convenient to be able to just go and grab the bag of ingredients and have recipes ready to pick and ready to go with everything I need. No last minute rushes to the market because I forgot something vital. I was blown away by how good the recipes are. Consistently. And it's so easy, with all the recipes taking about 30 minutes max and very minimal effort. Just a little bit of chopping, pretty much. It's made sure that we both get to eat satisfying, healthy meals that we've made at home instead of resorting to ordering unhealthy delivery, saving us time, money, and a lot of energy. I love EveryPlate, and I know you will too. So to get $1.99 per meal on your first box, plus free heat and eat meals for a month, use my code KAZURA199 at everyplate.com or click the link in the description below. That's one free item per box for 4 weeks with an active subscription. Thank you so much to EveryPlate for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to learning about Victorian hoaxes. Side note, if I look particularly haggard or tired today, part of it is the heat in this room, but also the fact that I had a major surgery just like 2 weeks ago, so have mercy on me, please. I'm doing a lot better than I was before, but still not at 100%. Anyway, as long as humans have been around, there have been fraudsters trying to twist the truth for their own gain, and there always will be. Sometimes they know what they're doing, like 99% of American megachurch pastors, or people on TikTok trying to claim that the hate crime they committed in a Burger King is actually victimizing them, and won't you please donate to their GoFundMe? Way back in ancient Greece, you had loads of dudes writing libelous claims about each other, a lot of which got believed for almost 2 millennia, because do you really think someone would do that? Go on papyrus scroll and tell lies? There's a very strange spectrum through history as to what ancient to modern eras we grant the benefit of the doubt, assuming that they're smarter or dumber than they actually were. Ancient Greeks and Egyptians and Romans often get taken at their word, having been romanticized as our wise forefathers, borderline mystical. The medieval era gets generalized as stupid and not to be believed, conditionally. Then the Enlightenment to now becomes a little bit of a mixed bag. We believe whatever they say that seems to affirm whatever idea it is we're looking for, but historical humans are always just like us. Sometimes they lie, sometimes they get lied to, and sometimes they create hoaxes, the lies that almost never fool us in hindsight, and yet we still fall for new ones when they crop up, because all hoaxes don't come from nowhere. They are almost always a reaction to or informed by the current time and politics of their own era. As Linda Walsh writes in Sins Against Science, the hoaxes contribute to the illumination of an issue that concerns all these schools of textual criticism, the negotiation of social reality between writers and readers through the mass media in order to satisfy as many of the public's, potentially competing, desires and expectations as possible. She explains that hoaxes all have one or more of these key features which separate a hoax from satire, which are the treatment of a societal tension, resistance to closure so the hoax can continue, the display of genius of the hoaxer, the creation of a conflicted relationship between the author and reader, parasitism on other genres like fantasy or dystopia, argumentation at the stasis of existence, relatedly, the destabilization of reality, the rejection of the context in which things happen, construction of an insider versus outsider dynamic, organizing the audience by their worldview, and encouraging the dependence on the media that is distributing the hoax. These might be sounding a little familiar, and it's because hoaxes haven't ever changed all that much, especially since the rise of mass media. One hoaxy trend taking over social media that also isn't new is one that I briefly touched on in my video on alien abductions: people who claim to be something called a starseed, or generally aliens, specifically superpowered, wise, and messianic ones. Look out for the ones who call themselves Palladians. They're usually the ones with a hint of, you know.
There are 3 signs that you might be a Pleiadian starseed: to feel everything so intensely. This strong superpower of empathy could be a hint of your Pleiadian nature.
Starseeds have a super different energy signature than other Earthlings. Because of this, they're often diagnosed with severe mental illness because of their inability to just go about life like nothing is wrong. They can see the corruption in place very clearly. The positives are that you're usually super smart and also really psychic. And if you can learn how to master your interdimensional traveling with your conscious energy, you don't have to feel lonely and you can connect to your family in space. Also, as the internet expands on these topics, you can find other starseeds like you. Cult, for example, is my cult full of starseeds. Tune into the next video to find out if you are a starseed.
Guys, don't worry. Any symptoms you might have of any emotional struggle you're going through, any empathy you may have for other people, that's not a normal human thing. It means you're an alien.
Actually, light language is the soul's vibration. Your soul will recognize this at a soul level.
But anyway, these alien influencers have been making bank, convincing vulnerable, often traumatized or mentally unstable people that they are, and you are, special aliens, and that's why you feel the way you do. Or that they can use their alien powers to heal your spirit. But first you need to buy their course. Buy the course! If anyone is ever trying to sell you a fucking course and they're not like a professor or on like a verified courses website or something, do not give them any money. I promise you, you can find that info for free online 100% of the time.
I'm sorry for doing Naruto jokes 2 videos in a row. I'm not even into Naruto like that.
So the first recorded media hoax that came about was around 1709 by a guy named Jonathan Swift, who went by the fake name Isaac Bickerstaff. If Jonathan Swift sounds like a familiar name to you, it's because he's the fellow who wrote Gulliver's Travels. Swift was a clergyman and satirist, and a good one too. When he wrote Gulliver's Travels, he even had it copied by someone else so that the handwriting couldn't be attached to him legally. But unlike that book, his 1709 almanac was intended to be taken at its word. Specifically, it was meant to humiliate some very specific victims. The famous astrologer John Partridge was predicted in the almanac to die on a certain day, with a fake obituary sent out on the day listed and everything. John Partridge himself, of course, did not die that day and only found out about the hoax when a priest came to his home to make funeral arrangements. Partridge was really embarrassed, and so were the readers who believed in astrology and therefore thought he would die. He was so embarrassed, he ceased writing astrological almanacs for 6 years. Which is really funny to me because the fake almanac that Swift wrote was obviously satire written to embarrass Partridge on purpose, so it never actually discredited him or astrology, but it's possible that people back then didn't know that yet. Linda Walsh continues, "The locus of the effect of a hoax is always in the reader. A reader who believes a hoax actually inhabits a different world, constructed by her new beliefs about what is possible in that world from the world of a reader who sees through the hoax and reads it from a skeptic's perspective. Thus, hoaxes build different epistemological worlds for different readers, and the whole raison d'etre of the hoax is to embarrass its readership for its misapprehension of the real world. This is why hoaxes and conspiracy theories are so addictive for people, and why people who get immersed in them are so hard to reason with or convince otherwise, like people who get invested in yarns like QAnon. They follow all of the points that make a hoax work. It seemingly explains, while also aggravating, societal tensions. It parrots literary genres that people get invested in. It refuses to give closure so that people always fall deeper and stay stuck in it. It closes people off in their worldview and convinces them that anyone who doesn't believe the hoax is an outsider that can't be trusted. It creates safe media that the hoax is distributed from that is apparently the only media you can trust, and it portrays the hoaxer as a genius figure that can guide you. And importantly, it creates strings connecting various themes and events together while rejecting context. As we know on this channel, context surrounding historical themes and events is everything. But if you ignore context, it's easier to meld it to the message that you want people to believe. It's harder to explain things with nuance because it makes people feel uncomfortable and they don't want to listen anymore. It makes them have to open up their worldview to other, less fun perspectives. But the truth is, and always will be, this: history without discomfort is propaganda. But the rise of modern fake news and hoaxing is, of course, intertwined with the means of its distribution. Following the invention of the printing press came the birth of what would become mass media, a thing that had never existed before. It was now easier than ever before to distribute ideas and stories directly to people, and more people too, and increasingly spread out to provincial areas outside of cities. The 19th century itself saw the approximate quadrupling of the number of papers and periodicals in circulation, and oftentimes these newspapers would cut and paste stories from each other, which is why when you go into a newspaper database today, you will see the same story reprinted like 50 fucking times in different papers. Not only this, but it wasn't uncommon for paper readers to cut out articles and save them, like the grandfather of today's screenshotting something to text to your friends. These newspaper stories were typically unverified, and the reporters were under a lot of pressure to not only get the biggest scoop out, but to be the first to report on it, leading to a great deal of over-exaggerated stories filled with hearsay. And if someone approached the press with some sort of spectacular tale that they can print, hey, why not? This sort of thing was especially common starting around the 1830s in the US with the emergence of the penny press, widely circulated, extremely cheap daily papers that were popular with working class people. The first successful penny daily was the New York Sun, a 4-page paper at the time that hawked sensationalized, gossipy, and often local stories. And this thing hit the public like crack. Compared to previous papers, which were more expensive and dreadfully serious, the penny dailies were like the 1830s news equivalent of like getting all your news from a guy on TikTok or Instagram Reels who explains things in pop terms or whatever. These papers reported a lot on fights, crimes, and scandals, while sometimes including word-for-word dialogue that almost certainly never happened, but was undoubtedly humorous. These dailies, being focused on legal affairs, would have basically one dude on staff called a local whose whole job was to be a nosy Nancy with a lot of connections, keeping up to date with all the drama around town and publishing it. The local for Virginia City, Nevada's Territorial Enterprise wrote, "Our duty is to keep the universe thoroughly posted concerning murders and street fights and balls and theaters and pack trains and churches and lectures and schoolhouses and city military affairs, and highway robberies, and Bible society, and hay wagons, and 1,000 other things, which it is in the province of local reporters to keep track of and magnify into undue importance for the instruction of the readers of this great daily newspaper. The devil is in the details here. Magnify undue importance is exactly right. It was easy for one overblown story to cause a domino effect of events, leading to widespread misunderstanding of a story, or for a fake story to be published entirely, and for it subsequently to be re-reported over and over until, some years in the future, it's remembered as fact. And few eras were worse about this than the godforsaken 19th century. In 1815, the city of Chester in the UK near Liverpool was shaken to its core when the sun dawned one August morning, and the city was littered with pamphlets declaring that the island of St. Helena, the very island where Napoleon Bonaparte was to be exiled, had a diabolical rat infestation. If the citizens of Chester could offer any physically adept cat, they would receive 10 to 16 shillings in payment. But on the day of the cat sales, when hundreds of people arrived holding even more hundreds of very confused cats, the catcherpreneur who sent out the call was nowhere to be found. This tale was told by a friend of the channel and Dracula author Bram Stoker in a book that I've already complained about multiple times, 1910's Famous Imposters. But just like the other stories in that book, this Chester cat hoax was just that. Yet another hoax. A hoax of a hoax. A hoaxception? It never happened. Now, this is yet again not actually Bram Stoker's fault. I mean, yeah, it's his fault that he published these urban legends as fact, but he wasn't actually exactly unique here. This was just another case in a long, long line going back to even before the Georgian era, making the Victorian era press and media what it was, as we've seen. The Chester cat hoax was repeated so much through the ages that it became accepted as fact, even inspiring copycat hoaxes just like it. We aren't sure who started the hoax of the hoax. It may have begun in Limerick newspapers or the Chester Chronicle, and each time it was repeated, as always, the details became more and more extreme. There's no such thing as a hoax that comes from nowhere. The Chester cat hoax, which, silly on the surface, was more sinister underneath. At the end of the tale, the story goes that the angry cat sellers drowned hundreds of cats in the River Dee. Coupled with a great amount of classism and anti-Irish sentiment, the hoax ends up becoming a hateful jab at a very vulnerable population of people. The Astrology Almanac hoax was a critique on people who tried to profit off of pseudoscience. Whether or not you believe in astrology, there can be some foul players there. Do we like that? We don't like the cat hoax, do we? She hates being picked up. No! Ah! Other hoaxes that we'll talk about in a bit are yanking people's chain with regards to an influx of scientific discoveries in the 19th century, sowing distrust in the scientific community, and still others were ploys to get money or power, as they usually are today. Victorian hoaxers were persistent little fellows and often hoaxed multiple times under different fake names. One local for the aforementioned territorial enterprise was a man named Dan DeQuille, whose real name was William Wright. Wright penned a story about an inventor in the Virginia City area who had created a rubber suit with a built-in AC so that the inventor can travel the Death Valley desert in comfort. The inventor donned his suit in the 117-degree weather and promptly disappeared. His body was discovered in the desert, having frozen to death inside his suit, with an 18-inch icicle hanging from his nose despite the heat. Whoa! Lots of lightning and thunder right now. Love. Another territorial enterprise local, Sam Clemens, would become even more famous than Mr. Wright, or rather Dan DeQuille, for Sam's pen name was Mark Twain, author of Tom Sawyer. Twain was equally interested in spinning tall tales in the paper, one of the big ones being the tale of the petrified man. He wrote that a strange petrified man was discovered sitting against a mass of croppings, positioned as if deep in thought. He was unable to be removed and buried because he was effectively glued to the limestone rock by dripping water calcifying down his back. and so this stone man remains sitting in nature where he is visited by curious tourists. Of course, this story is fake, but another tale he wrote was much less whimsical, one where a man lost all his money and violently murdered his wife and children. This one obviously got the paper into some hot water. Twain and Dan DeQuille were both kinda gagged at how gullible the readers were, but hey, easier to do their jobs then. But other locals were easily spotted as being hoaxers, and even became beloved for their false stories, like an early version of The Onion, like the Winstead Liar from Winstead, Connecticut, who regaled the city regularly with ridiculous and obviously fake news stories, like a story of a hen who took the train into the city, leaving an egg for payment. A New York Herald story in 1874 took an even more direct approach, claiming that a horde of wild animals had escaped from the Central Park Zoo and were at large in New York City, where the NYPD and National Guard engaged in horrid, bloody battle to recapture them, with over 200 casualties. And then, at the end of the story, came a little footnote. Of course, the entire story given above is pure fabrication. Not one word of it is true. Not a single act or incident described has taken place. It is simply a fancy picture which crowded upon the mind of the writer a few days ago while he was gazing through the iron bars of the cages of the wild animals in the menagerie at Central Park. But, of course, before a lot of readers could even reach that point, they had already started freaking the fuck out. Some men, apparently, went out into the street with guns to hunt the animals. People were panicked, worrying if their family members were safe. Needless to say, people weren't really laughing that this writer had made his zoo hallucination their problem. It reminds me of the big Orson Welles War of the Worlds scandal, which is a story for another day, but long story short, they broadcasted a hyper-realistic radio program of War of the Worlds, and people thought it was actually happening. Yeah. But the pressure to publish insane news stories quickly and, more importantly, first, could lead to some pretty extreme and desperate situations for reporters. After all, no one else can beat you to reporting on the story if you create the story, right? In October 1857, an extremely gruesome discovery was made underneath the Waterloo Bridge in London, a carpet bag containing various mutilated body parts. They were so mutilated and headless, in fact, that they couldn't be identified. But it was doubtlessly murder, and the police's efforts to solve the mystery were breathlessly reported by every paper, alongside literally any rumor or theory that cropped up. By the next year, the hype had died down with no murderer caught, and the remains were quietly buried along with the story itself. Until July 1872, when it was very suddenly reported that the entire thing had been a convoluted ruse concocted by a few reporters looking for a good payout. The reporters had collected dissected body parts from a hospital, covered them in bloody clothes, stuffed them in a carpet bag, placed it under Waterloo Bridge, and pre-wrote the news report, waiting for the bag to be found. The minute it was, they dropped the story at every newspaper office they could find and collected a handsome paycheck. By the time the jig was up in 1872, two of the reporters involved had already died, so there wasn't really any real closure for the fear and wasted time they caused. But it also wasn't exactly a shocking situation either. By the late Victorian era, the public had already been bombarded with a constant stream of bizarre, hoaxy news stories that threatened people's faith in the news industry, leading to a higher standard in reporting. One of the people rattling around the news with fake stories was, as we know, Mark Twain. But he wasn't the only famous author who liked to play games with the truth. Science in the 19th century wasn't just a spectacle, it was theater. Think the science hoax displays of P.T. Barnum's various critters. People were interested in science, and people were also very easily fooled. One author who realized he could play around with this was none other than Edgar Allan Poe, altogether a strange man, but in general undoubtedly creative. And boy, did he love hoaxes. In 1835, he published Hans Pfaall, a Tale, in the Southern Literary Messenger. As the story goes, Hans Pfaall, a burgher of Rotterdam, had invented a huge balloon that he used to fly to the moon to escape his debts. He also invented a breathing device so he could survive in space. While on the moon, Fall witnesses all manner of strange and unusual things. Dwarf-like humans specifically, which I don't know why that was supposed to be so crazy. But before he could publish another part really getting into the moon critters, we got Moon Landing 2! Courtesy of a guy named Richard Adams Locke, a science writer on staff at the New York Sun. This guy had already been floating around hoaxy spaces, writing about some weirdo named Matthias the Prophet, who was a cult leader at the time. Anyway, Locke published a story in The Sun in 1835 telling the story that I opened this video with, that Sir John Herschel had spotted moon bats, moon bison, and moon beavers. You'll never guess where. On the moon, using his fancy telescope. So yeah, 2 moon hoaxes in a row, and Poe was a little bit miffed that Locke was stepping on his turf, but whatever. He had more hoaxes up his sleeve. And by the way, in case you're wondering, yes, readers extremely did believe these stories. Poe figured he could get back on top of the scientific hoax game with yet another tale in 1844 when he published an extra in The Sun. Astounding news by express via Norfolk. The Atlantic crossed in 3 days. Signal triumph of Mr. Monk Mason's flying machine. Arrival at Sullivan's Island near Charleston, South Carolina of Mr. Mason, Mr. Robert Holland, Mr. Henson, Mr. Harrison Ainsworth, and 4 others in steering balloon Victoria after a passage of 75 hours from land to land. Full particulars of the voyage. Whoa! Man can travel by flying balloon now and at great speeds? How marvelous! Stories like this are the roots of what eventually evolved into steampunk. Now, Monk Mason was a real guy and a balloonist too, and Poe copied large swaths of his diaries for his story. Definitely a tamer hoax, and Poe claims it had a great reaction, but more importantly, he claims that it performed better than that loser Locke's moon hoax. On the topic of scientific hoaxes, a particularly wacky one that caused a lot of drama took place in 1867 when a very respected mathematician named Michel Chasles claimed that he had discovered letters from a guy during the French Revolution named Boisjordin, and the letters made the shocking claim that a Frenchman named Blaise Pascal had discovered gravity before Isaac Newton, among other things. Blaise Pascal was a known 17th century academic, and if his letters were to be believed, then it would mean that France would be the keystone of Enlightenment-era scientific thought. And oh my god, the French want that to be true so bad. But it was indeed suspicious, though. How do we know these letters are telling the truth? And why do they have so many inconsistencies? Suspiciously, whenever these questions popped up, Chasles was like, "1 minute, guys," and would go back to his letter supplier and reappear with more letters giving explanations to the questions, including an apparent letter from Galileo claiming that he was only pretending to be blind. The mysterious supplier turned out to be a dude named Vrain Denis Lucas, who seriously had Michel Chasles wrapped around his finger. Chasles was very nationalistic and very proud of his own intellect, which ironically made it extremely easy for him to be fooled so badly, because Lucas was able to appeal to his nationalism and present him proof of a reality that he wanted to be real. And Chasles was so respected, the academic world had a really hard time calling bullshit on him. Lucas eventually was arrested for his scamming, by which point it had already made him very, very rich. One hoaxer that seriously cracks me up is a guy named Sir Edmund Bacchus, whose name is spelled Backhouse, but is pronounced Bacchus, which honestly is more fitting for the deal this guy had going on. Bacchus was the son of a rich English family, temperamental, adept at writing, and gay. Despite his talents, his instability led him to accruing a huge £20,000 debt by 1895. To escape his debt and the increasingly hostile homophobia in the UK, Bacchus fled to Peking, China, which is now Beijing, and there he discovered a very comfortable life of luxury that he could afford, as well as brothels to entertain his interests. But he also didn't know how to stop hoaxing and scamming, which is what led to his debts in the first place. In 1910, Bacchus published his book, China Under the Empress Dowager, being the history and the life and times of Su Ce.
I overthought this one, and that's why I mispronounced it. It should be said, being the history of the life and times of Tzu Chi. I'm sorry, Chinese people. Kill me!
In which he claims to publish the salacious diary of a soldier named Qing Shan, who really was a guy that existed, but in reality was just a regular dude, rather than the well-connected gossipy sleuth that Bacchus paints him as, exposing tales from within the mysterious, forbidden city. Bacchus would spend years providing fake research and stories to academics and historians about the world of Peking and the Forbidden City. He wanted to be known as the grandest expert in the English-speaking world of all things Chinese, and nearly succeeded. After World War II, he wrote his memoirs, detailing his obviously overblown and unbelievable sexual adventures in China, as well as apparently befriending big names such as Oscar Wilde and Lord Alfred Douglas, Aubrey Beardsley, and Ellen Terry. And then, as if all of that wasn't enough, he claims he had sex with the Empress herself. Literally bonkers. What a freak. But God, the people loved a freak. Speaking of freaks, going back in time a little bit, a popular genre of book in the 19th century was the Lost Race novel. These books, in which characters discover mysterious and fantastical races previously unknown to mankind, were usually very obviously fiction. There was a lot of noble savage type stuff in there, lots of colonial elements. As Kevin Young writes in Bunk, it is no accident that these lost race elements began appearing at the end of the 19th century, just as an earlier age of exploration, which had given way to imperialism, began to see empires end, combining the going native trope from the age of exploration with the travel liar tradition, the codification of racialist science with the confusion of racist fictions. The Lost Race novel reveals the ways its precedents are underpinned with imperialism. There were some cases where these books were published, and because of the long tradition of travel liar fiction, people kind of did think that they were true, and then those assumptions persisted as travel became easier and easier for people to access, which, as you can imagine, was probably really fucking annoying and dangerous for the locals. The thing is, we're still unlearning a lot of Victorian humbug today. Honestly, there might be a lot of stuff in my own videos or sources that I've read in the past that fall victim to assuming that the experts who came before us knew what they were talking about, when in many cases they thought the exact same thing, cycling back and back and back in time until you reach some guy who lied. Some of these lies and hoaxes never got uncovered as such and never will. And it's really weird to think about how much of what we know about history is based around a lie or a hoax. We don't know what we don't know, so all we can do is our best. Be kind to ourselves and have understanding, but also always stay checking, learning, revising, revisiting, asking hard and harder questions. History is not fixed. Neither is the present. The past may be in the past, but much like memory, it shifts and becomes influenced by our present and all that surrounds us. The sooner we address modern hoaxes and humbug when they crop up, the easier the job will be for our friends waiting for us in the future, judgment in hand. Thank you for learning with me about some tall tales of yesteryear. I hope it gives you a little food for thought, as it did me. Don't forget to grab yourself a copy of my graphic novel, Liberated, The Radical Art and Life of Claude Cahun, and until next time, wash thy hands, wear thy mask, and remember, TikTok is full of false prophets.